Board now. All right. All right, everybody see that?
Yeah.
Political parties and their candidates and their campaigns. Remember that you have an option in Oklahoma. God bless you.
Thank you.
If you want to simply vote for all Republicans or all Democrats or all of a third party like Libertarian, there is a option on the ballot, straight party voting. But you don't have to. If you're a Republican, you could vote. You could have voted for Gary Johnson or Hillary as a Republican in 2016. Republicans were, the Republican base of support was primarily white middle-class Americans from the South or the Midwest and many Christians. Democrats are made up of more minorities such as African Americans, Hispanics. They also have a larger number of people who are members of a union. They have more people from the lower class. They have more city dwellers, whereas Republicans have more rural citizens. And all of the supporters of the Republicans, or the majority of them, could be described as those who want government to stay small and unintrusive, while Democrats are for a greater level of government involvement to help those such as the poor and the minorities. So they usually sponsor the social programs much more regularly than the Republicans. In the United States, in our 240 plus year history, we've had over 1,000 third parties. Now, we are not officially a two-party system. That's just how it came about. Some of our founders didn't like the idea of parties, but that's kind of how it formed, and it stayed that way. Most other democracies in our world are either a single-party system or a multi-party system. We're the only two-party system. But we've had several third parties over the years, such as the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, the Socialist Party. So some famous ones included the Bull Moose Party, which was really the National Progressive Party. Teddy Roosevelt ran as president. The Reform Party, which kind of fizzled out in 2000, had Ross Perot run for president in 92. And the Reform Party even had a governor on state. A former wrestler named Jesse the Body Ventura became governor in Minnesota in the late 1990s. And Jesse the Body has been in a couple of movies with Schwarzenegger, and his buddy Schwarzenegger became governor of California later in the 2000s as a Republican, though. In 2016, Gary Johnson ran on the Libertarian ticket. So there was a third party candidate. I forgot to mention his nice suit with the tennis shoes there.
I saw those last time.
Then we had some characters like Vermin Supreme, who was a libertarian running for president. He wanted to fund research into time travel and zombie apocalypse. So, and even though he ran, I think really he's more of a spoof. But anyway, it's very entertaining to see a guy with a rubber boot on his head. So at the very end, we briefly mentioned that actually, we were just about to get into this. One thing that I wanted to mention that's on page 234 of your textbook is that there's 4 types of voting setups that states have. And Oklahoma, as you can see, is what's known as a partially open primary. What that means is, and I'm not sure if this is true in all Oklahoma counties because even county by county can be different. But for example, I'm registered as a Republican, and if there's a county election here in Pittsburgh County, and let's say there's a county commissioner office open, and there's 3 people running, and all 3 of them are Democrats. Well, I could not vote because I'm registered Republican. I would have to wait until the general election when the Republican is running versus the Democrat. So that's a partially open primary. You all are in Lafleur County, and Lafleur County is also a Democrat strong county. So if you're not registered as a Democrat, there might be a lot of local or county elections that if there's no Republican candidate or no independent candidate, you could not vote. So political parties do not have a lot of power. They are simply kind of a connection of like-minded individuals with similar ideas, similar viewpoints. And so, for example, the National Republican Party cannot tell the Oklahoma Republican Party, a state party, what to do. And then if there's a Republicans of Lafleur County, the state organization cannot tell the local organization what they can do. So parties are organized at different levels, and again, they're, a party cannot say you're going to run for senator and you're not, and you're going to run and you're not. They can't do that. If someone wants to run for senator, they can, and you might have several, which we did in our governor race a couple years ago. We had several Republicans running for governor. Our present governor, Kevin Stitt, is a Republican. The mayor of New York City, a guy by the name of Mick Cornett, ran as a Republican. So you had several Republicans run for governor. So there had to be a primary runoff. And then Kevin Stitt won the primary. And then he went to the general election, and he faced the Democratic candidate. And then, of course, that libertarian guy that I showed you named Joe Exotic. And so I say all that to say this: the National Republican Organization could not tell Kevin Stitt, no, you won't run for governor because we like Mick Cornett. They could not do that. Now, they could put all their support behind Mick Cornett, but Kevin Stitt still had, the right to run and receive donations, even if maybe he did not have the National Republican Organization's support. So what we want to finally talk about in Chapter 8 is what we're seeing a lot today are campaigns that are centered around the candidate. For example, one of the best examples of a recent candidate-centered campaign with a very highly popular candidate was the presidential campaigns of Barack Obama in 2007 and 8. He was a very well-known and marketable candidate that they campaigned around him. So, for example, when Barack Obama, the political leader, he was a senator from Illinois, when he says, when he makes the announcement, I'm running for president, he then has to put together a team, a campaign strategy team. And this team will deal with finances, election day polling, ground campaign, ground intelligence, and then even further, all of these things. Let me go to a different graph here that breaks it down a little bit more. So you would have candidate Obama.
Hey guys, I just want to do a little heads up on the dress up day for Spirit Week next week. Let's be sure that we are adhering to the dress code, shorts and skirts and things need to go down to your fingertips as you have been reminded. Thank you.
What is it, dress up day for homecoming?
Yeah, it's next week.
All right, follow your student handbook on appropriate attire. Does Panama and Arcoma get a student handbook?
There is one, but like we don't. I think ours is online. We can go look at it online.
You should read it. It's good stuff.
It's really long.
Okay, has anybody come back into Panama's class since we started?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So you'd have candidate Obama, and then he would have a campaign manager or a strategist to coordinate and plan basically their strategy of attack, their strategy to get him elected. So Obama would, or Trump, or whoever the candidate might be, they would basically focus on getting out there and meeting voters, raising funds. They would be invited to dinners and banquets and things by organizations and groups to raise money. So they would be in close contact to their financial officer or treasurer. Of course, they coordinate with the manager. And then they would have a campaign committee or a kitchen cabinet. The manager, you can see, works with all of these, kind of the next tier of lieutenants underneath that strategist. Someone would be your media relations person, set up TV and radio interviews or commercials. Get someone to take care of sending out postcards, putting up flyers, getting banners, all that fun stuff. Then you have a volunteer coordinator or a field staffer that would be over your volunteer staff. You'd have some precinct captains, yard sign coordinator, and then you have that second tier of lieutenants. You have a database coordinator. This person will deal with logistics about, if we stick with the presidential candidate, Obama's a Democrat from Illinois. This person would want to look into how can we get Obama some more votes in Texas or Oklahoma, which are more conservative and Republican. But they would also look for their strongest bases of support and try to get Obama in those places as much as possible. New York City, Los Angeles, Miami, Chicago, Houston, Dallas, all the big urban areas. Then you have under these lieutenants, I'm not sure what comes next, but maybe captains, and then you got your volunteers and supporters. And they're the ones putting up yard signs. They're going door to door knocking. They're calling people saying, hey, make sure you have your voter ID, all these kinds of things. Brochures, phone calls, sign waving. And they're calling people for donations. So this is a somewhat organized picture of a campaign strategy. So the manager here would want to set up places for the candidate to go and maybe go to a little town and talk to people in a cafe, or go to a rally at the state fair and give a little speech and shake people's hands and kiss babies, things like that. And there was a famous campaign in which the candidates were fighting to kiss a baby.
Oh, I've seen this. Oh. Oh, well. This is awful.
Oh no. Oh no.
I laughed so hard when I watched that. That is so awful.
There's the campaign strategist for the other guy. He's like, awesome, this is great.
There's something new is coming out of the 14th district congressional race in North Carolina. Now get this. Cam Brady, four-time congressman, punched a baby. This is likely to hurt him with the Christian right, social conservatives, really any group that opposes
Baby punch gate.
Baby is fine. He said he punches like a 3-year-old. After Cam Brady's baby punching incident, Marty Huggins has jumped 11 points in the polls.
That is totally taken out of context. So.
All right, so I think he lost the race.
I would imagine.
You just see you in the principal's office. If you drew on the sidewalk and you drew SpongeBob, the turtle and water bottle, and then the iPhone or tablet app that's close to the steps.
Actually, that was a movie. I'm sure you have heard of it, The Campaign.
Yes.
All right. I think later he punches a dog. Anyway, some well-known candidates that really were their campaign was really centered around them, and their personality was John Kennedy. He defeated Nixon. He came in at the time as the youngest president ever.
Office and wait inside, please.
At the time, I think he was 46. So he was the youngest president ever at the time. And, he campaigned on being, well, the Kennedys were well known already in 1960. He had married a beautiful woman, and so he got a lot of press coverage because of her. And he was younger than Nixon, and before Nixon you had Johnson and I'm sorry, not Johnson, but you had Eisenhower and Truman. And so you had older men in their 60s usually. So he came on as a younger man, popular, the guy to take America into the 60s. And his campaign slogan was "The New Frontier." In the 80s, Ronald Reagan was a huge personality that his campaign was built around. He was a former governor of California, but more importantly, he had been an actor in Hollywood. So Schwarzenegger was not the first actor governor in California. And Reagan, when he was governor, he was a Democrat. He ran as a Republican for president, and he was a well-known, very likable personality. Then I mentioned Obama, 2008, 2012, Yes We Can, and campaigned on the idea of change. He's going to bring change to America. So I think we could say Trump was a candidate-centered campaign. Major personality, major ego, well known for business as well as reality shows. So it seems like we live in a time where most major elections are candidate-based more than issue-based. Any questions on that part of Chapter 8?
No, sir.
Chapter 9 is about special interests. Now in that video, Chris Matthews mentioned that punching a baby will probably not be good with the Christian conservative group. When we talk about special interests, we talk about groups that are organized to influence policymakers, and they're either centered around one single issue. For example, the National Rifle Association, their sole issue is gun control and protecting the Second Amendment. So you have single issue special interests, and then you have special interest groups that are a little bit broader, but they are based around a theme, like the Christian Coalition, which is based around family values, morality, our Christian heritage as a nation. So they would be against several issues like abortion, gay marriage. They would want to bring school back, or prayer back into school. So they're kind of, they're against stem cell research. So several issues that kind of revolve around the main theme of morality. So you have several special interest groups like that. So again, a special interest is a group of people who share common goals, and they get organized so that they can influence the government. They spend a lot of money, and some of them spend a lot more money than others. And they engage in quite a few activities to try to persuade senators and cabinets to support their bills or their policies. So they, like we said, they seek to influence public policy decisions, and interest groups are very unique in the sense that they are very, I mean, you have interest groups in other countries, but America has more interest groups than anybody because we have a pluralist democracy. Individuals can choose who they join with, what they're going to fight for, what they're going to support. So we are very unique as a nation because we have so many interest groups. Now, I mentioned last week that a political party is what is known as a linkage mechanism, which simply means that it connects the voting population, the citizens, with their government. Interest groups are also linkage mechanisms, but they differ from political parties in three main ways. Political parties are responsible for the nominating process. Interest groups simply hope to influence those who are nominated. So if you watched the debate last week, Bernie Sanders was pretty proud of the fact that he's always had a no rating, or an F rating, excuse me, an F rating with the NRA. And he's proud of that. So do you think that the NRA is going to try to influence Bernie Sanders' campaign? Yes or no?
No.
No, they won't even. Of course, they're not going to really worry about the Democrat candidate anyway, because all the Democrats are for stricter gun control. But now, if there are three candidates who, let's say the Democrats finally narrow it down to three candidates. Let's say, for example, it's Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden and Beto O'Rourke. Beto came right out and said, he's the one whose quote is on a t-shirt now, that yes, we're going to get rid of AK-47s and AR-15s. Bernie and Joe, they might just say, no, we're not going to get rid of them. We're just going to make it harder for people to obtain them. So the NRA would probably spend some money trying to get Bernie defeated. So political parties are over the nominating process. Interest groups just hope to influence the nominations. Political parties are interested in winning elections and controlling the government, while interest groups simply want to influence the policies created by government. What is a group? Let me find a group here. a group like the NAACP.
What is that?
What kind of policies will they focus on that they want to see passed? Would they be basically for policies that
What does that stand for?
National Association, I can't remember the other A now, of colored people, the NAACP? Somebody, if you want to Google it, and you can help us out there. But with all the debate in the last few years about police officers versus African Americans, and the ideas that police officers tend to single out African Americans more, and
National Association of the Advancement of Colored People.
of the advancement of colored people. Okay, thank you. So let's say there's a policy, or lawmakers want to pass a policy about keeping law enforcement more accountable. And right now, you know, law enforcement officers, every time they get out of their car, they're supposed to turn on their dash cam. And many of them now are starting to carry phone cameras on them. So let's say that a group of senators, they want to pass a law that says if an officer is in a very high stressful situation, they don't have to worry about turning their camera on.
I need Micah Cranford and Jason Aller to the office, please.
And so but then there's senators on the other side who say, we want them to always turn the camera on, even if it's a high stress situation. Which policy do you think the NAACP is going to try to get passed?
Always have the camera on.
Yeah, always have the camera on. So they want to influence policy, and then political parties really focus on a whole range of issues, while interest groups, as I said earlier, tend to focus on a few issues that revolve around one theme, like morality, or they focus on a single issue. The National Farmers Union is going to be a group that would, the main theme is farming and agriculture. Then they're going to focus on helping milk farmers, wheat farmers, peanut farmers, catfish farmers. They're going to focus on just those issues. They're not going to focus on the bill about do police officers have to have their camera on or not. Political parties will focus on several things, whereas interest groups, just a few, and usually just one. Interest groups are also known as lobbying groups, so they do lobby. This little picture kind of captures the idea that lobbyists are kind of like a moat around the White House. And if you're going to be a politician who works in Washington, D.C., you have to deal with lobbyists. They will write letters, they will make phone calls, they will come and visit you at your office, they will have demonstrations in maybe the rotunda of the Capitol. They will go to the offices of the senators and congressmen. They raise money. They testify before Congress. they contribute money. So lobbyists are involved in a number of things to get their policies passed. They also seek to educate the public, and also they want to debate with others of different viewpoints so that the public can see the differing viewpoints. Seems like wasn't there a small group that formed after the school shooting in Florida a couple of years ago? Wasn't there like a grassroots parents organization that started? I think so, but I can't remember for sure. So they would want to debate like the NRA in public on these issues. Now, there are different types of interest groups. Let me start down here and I'll go back up. You have economic interests, and they usually deal with things like business. You might have a group called there's a group called the American Petroleum Institute. So they're going to be in the business of petroleum production, regulation. Then you have an agricultural or farmers group. You have a labor group. Usually your unions are in this. Then you have professional groups. My wife is a physical therapist. She is in the I think National Physical Therapy Association. So they're a group that will lobby in Washington on behalf of physical therapists. So you have economic interests, and their main focus is to make profits, provide jobs, improve pay. That would especially be true of the labor groups, the unions, and protect an occupation like physical therapy or the American Medical Association. Then you have environmental interests like the Audubon Group. And you can see here, these are all state groups in Minnesota. So you even have interest groups on the state level. You have equality interests, interests that would, be concerned about civil rights being equally applied to all citizens. Then you have more of what our textbook would call citizens groups, and they deal with public interests like the League of Women Voters, consumers, your citizens groups are usually the single issue groups. But there are also multiple issue groups like the Christian Coalition. And a lot of times these citizen groups, the economic interests, are basically about money. The citizen groups are about participating because it's a worthy cause. It's the right thing to do. On page 258 and 259, make sure you read about the advantages and disadvantages of these groups. One advantage that the economic interests have is that they have more money. Since you have businesses involved, a lot of these citizen groups depend upon donations, and groups up here, like business, will have money, or like the labor unions, they will charge dues. So you have to pay dues to be in it. So interest groups everywhere. Some people think we have way too many interest groups who influence politicians. You've probably heard the phrase that Senator so-and-so is in the pocket of the NRA or whatever it might be. So there is debate about, are interest groups good for America? So any questions?
I don't think so.
Have a great weekend. And we will see you Monday. I will get the Module 2 report assignment instructions up in a few minutes.
Okay.
We'll see you Monday.
See ya.
See ya.
Oh, did anybody else come in at Panama?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.